Hello, and welcome to The Grove. Today we'll be continuing the story The Eye in the Abyss by Anthony Reynolds.
The shell that had been Olar's stone fist cracked upon with a wet tear, and a pale thing spilled forth in a tumble of hissing ichor and segmented limbs. It rightened itself unsteadily, clawing at the ice with talons the length of daggers and slashing tails unfurled behind it. And it lifted its head. All bony tusks and jutting spines revealed a burning, purple-tinged light at its heart. Sections of its spongy, flexible exoskeleton closed protectively around that heart and began to harden. It was a sticky white color, devoid of hue, but its hide quickly darkened, as if in reaction to the air. The creature's eyes tore open to look upon the icy world into which it had been born. 12 pinpricks of hot, purple light gathered in 3 clusters. It lifted its head high, and a keening birth scream ripped from its throat. Hela and Sigvar were halfway to the Bridge of the Lost when the inhuman cry reached them. It echoed through the fog all around them. It was impossible to tell the direction it came from, or how close it was. "Climb faster," was all Hela said, and the pair increased their pace, eschewing safety for speed. Their picks hacked into the ice in a wild flurry, and they drove themselves upward with powerful kicks, toe spikes biting deep. Sigvar kept glancing down, expecting some nameless horror to emerge from the depths at any moment. And then, just as the ghost of the Bridge of the Lost appeared through the fog above it, it did. "Eyes in her soul," he hissed, and Hela looked down past him. "Move!" she shouted, eyes narrowing. They climbed frantically. If that thing made it to them before they reached the bridge, they'd be helpless. Sigvar glanced back once more to see the creature racing up on them. It ascended with vile, sinuous movement, multiple bladed limbs stabbing into the ice with frenzied speed. Glowing eye clusters blazed, and it screeched, the sound like steel grinding on steel, mandibles clacking. Hela made it to the bridge first. Turning, she reached down to Sigvar with her iron grip and hauled him over the edge. By the time he regained his feet, she had untied her ropes and had Bloodfang at the ready. In her other hand, Hela held one of her ice picks. It was a poor substitute for Bloodclaw, but would have to suffice. Sigvar dropped his picks and made to unsling Thunderchild from his back, but Hela stopped him. "No," she said. "Keep climbing." "I will stand with," he began, but she cut him off with a glare. "You will climb, Quiver," she said, pointing at him with Bloodfang. "No discussion." "But no discussion," she snapped. "Climb. Get word to the Citadel. But I should be the one who..." "Go!" she roared with such fury that Sigvar took a step back. "Go, Half-Quiver," she said, quieter. "If the 3 will it, I will join you shortly." With great reluctance, he scooped up his picks and began climbing, as Hela dropped to her knees in prayer, eyes closed. He was some 30 feet up the wall when the creature scuttled over the edge of the bridge. It looked up, its eyes locked on Sigvar, and started to move in pursuit. "Here, you ugly beast," Hela called out, rising to face it. "Come to me, and let me smite you down by the will of the 3. Sigvar looked on, powerless. The creature below swung its attention from him to Hela and leapt toward her with seemingly impossible speed. She rolled under its scything strike, talons sweeping through the air just inches above her. She hacked Bloodfang deep into its side as she came up, sending forth a burst of streaming entrails and eliciting a horrible screech. Then she followed up with a strike from her ice pick, but it bounced harmlessly off the beast's toughened exterior. She danced away, spinning out of its range as the monster lashed out at her again. Hela struck twice more, hacking off one of the vile creature's limbs and scorning a deep wound across the side of its head. But it was unnaturally fast. As Hela's axe came back for another blow, it darted forward and stabbed one bladed limb through her forearm, making her drop Bloodfang with a hiss of pain. She hacked desperately at the creature's face with her ice pick, but managed little other than putting out a few of its eyes. Her arm was still impaled. She couldn't get away. With a roar, Sigvar ripped his picks from the ice and pushed himself off. 30 feet he fell before landing, knees bent and hands outspread for balance right beside Hela. The frozen flagstones cracked under the impact, and he rolled hard, the wind driven from his lungs. He already had Thunderchild in his hands as the creature turned its attention towards him. It tried to tug its clawed limb from Hela, but she clutched onto it, keeping it trapped even as it struggled. "Strike, Half-Quiver!" Its maw opened impossibly wide, imposing rows of serrated fangs and tusks, and screaming in defiance as Sigvar brought Thunderchild around in a lethal blow. The immense hammer took the creature squarely in its head, half pulping it and sending it flying, with a burst of cold and a crack like thunder. The hateful beast struck the balustrade of the bridge and tried to scramble to its feet, but staggered drunkenly, the purple light at its heart faltering. Bellowing, Sigvar charged the monster as it tried to recover. It hissed but could do nothing to avoid his next attack. This time, Thunderchild smashed it squarely in the chest, crushing its exoskeleton and sundering the protective cage around its glowing heart. As the beast sailed over the edge of the bridge, flailing wildly, that heart darkened and died. Then it was swallowed by the fog and was gone.
This was rash,
said Hela. She was slumped on the ground, her wounded arm hanging loose at her side. Her skin was pale, paler than usual, and her eyes were sunken and dark.
Or perhaps it was the will of the three,
Sigvar replied, moving to her side and dropping to his knees.
Perhaps,
she conceded, smiling weakly. Using a knife, Sigvar cut away the bloodied sleeve over Hela's injured arm. The flesh around the wound was dark and steaming. Blackness was already spreading into her veins. Both of them knew what could happen if the darkness were to spread any further.
Use Bloodfang,
said Hela. There's no hint of fear in her voice.
Aim true,
she added, tapping the center of her chest. Sigvar took up Bloodfang, gogging its weight. Ice radiated from the haft over its hands, but he barely registered.
It is not yet spread beyond your arm,
he said.
It may not.
Hela stared up at him, eyes clear and devoid of fear. Then she nodded.
Do it,
she said. For 3 days, Sigvar climbed, and for 3 days he felt the malignant eye in the deep watching him. He felt the ravenous hunger in that gaze, gnawing at him, eating away at his resolve. But he continued on.
Endure without pain. The ice begs not for mercy, nor offers it. Neither shall we.
While the hunger of that ancient being was palpable, Sigvar realized there was no real emotion in it. It did not feel anger or hatred or resentment at its fate. It was dispassionate, uncaring, unknowable, impatient. In a sense, that made it even more horrific. Nor was it alone. Sigvar had no idea how many other watchers were trapped at the bottom of the howling abyss. But as he climbed, he felt other gazes turning toward him, following his progress. Finally, he pulled himself onto the Bridge of Sorrows. Only now, as he climbed from the great chasm, did he finally move beyond their gaze. Hela ice in her soul was roped to his back. Her eyes were closed and her breathing shallow, but she lived. Her left arm was gone below the shoulder, but there was no blood on her sleeve. The true ice core of Bloodfang had effectively sealed the wound. Bearing her had been exhausting, making the difficult climb that much harder. But such was his duty, and he had done it without complaint. Pausing only a few seconds to catch his breath, Sigvar stomped heavily across the bridge towards the citadel. It felt like he had been gone for years. The way was obscured with a billowing ice storm, so that he couldn't see more than a dozen yards. As the walls loomed out of the storm before him, he saw a shadowy figure awaiting him. Ralaka Splittongue, Frostfather of the Keepers, leaned heavily upon his staff of office. Sigvar eyed the black tip of that staff as he stomped to a halt before the gate and took in the shard of ice hanging around the priest's neck. He looked upon the two of them with unease. He knew where they came from now.
Few among your brethren have glimpsed the darkness below as we have,
said the old priest.
Your understanding of the faith has deepened, but there is still much to learn.
Sigvar nodded, accepting this. Split-Tongue's gaze then settled on Hela, strapped unconscious upon Sigvar's back, before shifting behind him, searching.
Stonefist?
He asked, to which Sigvar simply shook his head. He was too exhausted to say more.
From ice we are born, to ice we return,
said the frost priest, touching the center of his forehead in reverence.
It's melting,
Sigvar managed.
One of the 9, something emerged. The watchers stir,
breathed the priest, eyes widening, perhaps in awe, perhaps in fear. Sigvar merely nodded, his breathing ragged. His prodigious strength was close to failing him.
Our revered mistress, the Lady of Ice and Darkness, must be informed,
said the priest. The immense gates of the citadel ground open, the shadows within beckoning.
Come, Iceborn. We must prepare for what is to come.